In the far reaches of the American Southwest, where the mesas cut the sky and the stars burn like ancient beacons, stories have been told for centuries. Stories of spirits that walk between worlds, of star beings who came down from the heavens, teaching mankind the ways of creation and the way of destruction. And on the lands of the Navajo Nation, the unexplained has never been just a story. It's been reality. For most encounters with UFOs, cryptids, and witchcraft, they are whispered about in campfire tales or hushed inside of a skiff and then talked about in secret classified reports. But for one man who I've respected for quite a while and really have wanted to have on the show and have a conversation with, these weren't just legends. They were case files. Today, we're joined by a legend who's worked that razor's edge thin line between the spiritual and the scientific. Lieutenant Jonathan Redbird Dover, a Navajo Ranger with over 3 decades in law enforcement, trained in archaeology, forensics, tactical operations, yet assigned to investigate what others dismissed as folklore. Cryptid sightings like skinwalkers, hauntings, witchcraft, and UFOs over the sacred desert lands. Across cultures, across the globe, the Dogons of Africa to the Maya of Central America, and the Sumerian carvings all the way back to the Navajo sand paintings. Humanity has been telling the same story. Beings descending from the stars, knowledge beyond comprehension, and technology that feels more like memory than discovery. Are we rediscovering what ancient civilizations once knew? Or are we being reminded of who's still watching? This is Total Disclosure, and it's time we open the official case file for the unknown with Navajo Ranger, my buddy, John Dover. Oh, welcome to the show, John. Welcome. I've had such tremendous respect and honor for you and to have you here today. I think we talked a little bit about this off stage, so I really want to say thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Your story, I mean, it's one, your story it's almost written for TV or written for sci-fi films, and it just, your life seems like it has just been such a thrilling adventure. And I really obviously want to get into a lot with you about mythology and the Navajo and, the curse of the Skinwalker and all that good stuff. But I really do want to get to know who John Dover is. So before we dive into the unknown, can you tell us what led you into law enforcement and ultimately the Navajo Rangers?
Well, I had an interest in law enforcement. I had worked for McDonnell Douglas in Monrovia, California, and really liked it. And that was just security work. I had applied with the Coconino County Sheriff's Department, and I ended up out of 150 applicants being ranked number 2, but they were only hiring 1.
Oh,
so,
wow.
But it encouraged me because I knew I could compete. So after that, I kind of, looking for work, and they had a position showing on the Navajo Nation, little notice in the chapter house that said they're looking for a ranger. I had no idea what a ranger was. And so I did my application. It got sent in. Window Rock is about 130 miles away. They sent my application in, and next thing I know, they said I had an interview. So the chapter at the time had a job program that helped you secure work. So they actually gave me a ride to Window Rock. Back in those days, it was a lot of it was dirt road. So traveled to Window Rock. I went in the office, met with the ranger director, and he asked me only one question. He said, "How do you feel about somebody threatening your life or the life of your family?" And I
What was
immediately
your
shot back. I immediately told him, I says, "Well, I'll take a 300 Savage and cut their ears off at 200 yards." And he looked at me and he says, "You're hired."
and
Still
like
didn't know
that?
what a ranger was.
So you knew
Um,
what a ranger was in the context, though. So you just didn't know what a Navajo ranger was.
right, right.
So,
So
okay,
after that, I find out that their job is resource law enforcement and protection. So
okay,
it includes all areas of renewable and non-renewable resources. So game and fish,
hmm,
forestry, um, just mines, minerals, water resources, everything. And then there was a search and rescue component that was included that we were tasked with under tribal code. And then on top of that, you had to attend the police academy. And on occasion, you'd have to do police work. And
okay,
within the park areas, because we were park rangers, we were the park police. So I get
got it.
a memorandum that says you're to attend the Navajo Police Academy for 6 months. And back then, police academies were only 12 weeks. So to have one to go 24 weeks was pretty
Odd.
intense. And I went to the police academy, and my memorandum that I got said that if you don't pass the police academy, you'll be terminated. So I went in. I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this. There are 4 Rangers total that went in the police academy. This is the Navajo Police Academy, and we spent 6 months in this police academy, and I finished with the top honors for the academy, including the Outstanding Cadet Award and academics and marksmanship. And all 4 Rangers completed that course. Out of 77 students that were assigned to it, only 32 graduated.
Jeez. So very selective. Very, very selective.
Yeah, very tough. And after I finished, I was certified in Arizona. I went to additional training to be certified in New Mexico. And I held commission cards with Coconino County, what they call reciprocity. And so I was state certified, I was tribally certified, and then we had to be federally certified under what they call an SLEC, which is a special law enforcement commission under the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Wow. So it's a very long process and it's a very grueling process. Now, again, you kind of said it from the beginning that you thought that this was odd that it was so intense, or were you just not even thinking about that?
I had no idea at the time, and Navajo Police decided that they wanted to do one academy with an emphasis on academics as opposed to physical stuff. So that's what I was involved in, and there was one guy that was ahead of me. He would later on become the chief of police for Navajo Nation, but toward the end of the academy, everybody was relaxing, and just like the long distance runner that I was at the time, I decided I'm going to sprint to the finish line and
Hell yeah.
work even harder. and I passed them just by a few points.
That's amazing. So, okay, and now, okay, you become you become a ranger. Now, for folks who aren't familiar, what separates? So why is the police? Why is there a different police force on a reservation and off a reservation? And where does that separation begin, and why?
Well, the Navajo Nation is sovereign. So the U.S. government deals with the Navajo Nation at a State Department level. So because we're sovereign, you're literally going into another country when you come
Right.
onto any reservation. And there's 574 reservations across the United States, or at least that many tribes. Some of them don't have reservations. And then after that, the more intense training started. The police academy is just the basic. After that, I was loaned out to the National Park Service for 6 months and trained in, they call it interpretation. This is not language interpretation. This is interpreting the landscape and the artifacts and everything else within the monument there.
Got it.
After that, I went through game and fish training, forestry training, just every kind of law enforcement training for resources that you could get into. And I was already a specialist with ropes. I was an instructor in the academy for technical rescue, because that had been one of the things I loved to do was to climb. So I ended up putting on the course for 1 week for the police academy while I was a student there. And later on, I became the instructor for high angle technical rescue.
Interesting. So how long is it before you become a ranger and till the moment, or how long is it until you climb to a degree where then you get asked to do this?
Well, you're asked to do it almost immediately, but we used to like to say on average, it would take 3 years to fully train a ranger.
Okay.
And so, it was a pretty demanding process. There was a lot of, like, we did livestock issues, issues with people that had disputes. So they're civil matters, but we would get involved in those, livestock theft, even cattle mutilations.
Well, that's what I was
livestock.
Yeah.
So yeah, Stan had a rather startling one, and I think he recorded it in his book, The Paranormal Ranger, where he had 30 sheep that died inside a corral overnight. And these sheep, he said, were split open from the groin all the way to the jawbone. And there was no blood. And I don't know if you've ever cut sheepskin before, but it's tough.
No.
The wool is so tough that railroaders that were running trains hated to hit a herd of them because it could literally wrap up in the trucks and derail a train.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what you're implying is that to okay. I'm sorry, continue. I see where you're going.
So he said that when he got there, there was a metallic smell in the air. The dogs, the sheep dogs, would not go anywhere near that corral. The vet came out and could not tell anybody what had happened or what had caused this. And he said that the wounds almost looked like they had been cauterized. They were just straight as an arrow.
So like with precision.
Yes.
And this is done overnight to 20 plus of these sheep. And there's an
Yeah.
ozone metallic taste in the air. And so, I mean, so you, okay, so it sounds like you guys were introduced. Now, because let me, maybe I missed something. When you sign up, you said you didn't know what a ranger was. When did you find out that being a ranger included investigating the paranormal, investigating these otherworldly, you know, encounters and things that, you know, maybe the sovereign nation of the United States didn't recognize or doesn't recognize as being real?
Well, you have to understand that when I entered in 1980, um, the Rangers had been established since 1957,
Mm-hmm.
and they were modeled on the National Park Service Ranger.
Right.
So we were there really to be helpful as much as we could, and that's how we were trained. At meeting with tourists and giving directions, and just trying to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all rangers experience some level of paranormal activity going on in their districts, and this was just matter of fact, every kind of like an everyday occurrence.
So part of
But you didn't talk about it because number one, you didn't want anybody to say you're crazy because
naturally.
the government had been ridiculing people that reported UFOs. So the officers would not talk about it. They had encounters with Bigfoot, encounters with skinwalkers, encounters with hauntings, and it went unsaid.
Right.
In my early career, I had many cases where I saw UFOs, some of them up close. All different types, discs, cigar shapes, squares, orbs, triangles, and you just kind of kept it to yourself. You didn't really say anything.
Okay.
It wasn't until 2000 that we actually got officially involved. And Stan and myself were in a meeting. A department meeting had been called for reservation wide. Everybody drive the window rock and sit down and hear what the chief ranger had to say. Chief ranger had sent two officers, both of them were rookies, to take a report of the Bigfoot that Grandma and Grandpa had seen step over their corral. And these corrals are, about 4 feet tall.
Right.
And grab a sheep, tuck it under its arm, step over again, and walk off with it.
What the?
So Grandma and Grandpa report this. And the two rangers that got sent, both of them are rookies. Both of them, if you knew them, you'd understand this. We call them jokers. They're always got some kind of a private little joke going, always giggling and laughing about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fun to be around, because they lighten up the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But Grandma and Grandpa saw them giggling and laughing about something, and they thought they were laughing at them. And one thing about Navajo culture is if an elder chews you out, you don't say anything. You respect
Take
them
it.
and you just listen. And they came in and they chewed out our chief ranger. So in turn, they say it rolls downhill. He brought
Downhill.
us
Yep.
all in and chewed us out. And then he said, from now on, these cases will be investigated professionally and technically, and reports will be written. Then he turned to Stan and I, and he said, and he pointed his finger, I remember that. And he said, and you two are going to get all the major cases. And we kind of looked at each other, and I looked at Stan and thought, we've just been voluntold.
Right.
And that was it. Now, we think that the reason we were picked was that Stan was born on the reservation, but he was raised in Oklahoma, near Tahlequah. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, but spent all of my summers on the Navajo reservation. So we had a different upbringing that didn't, I guess, buck Navajo religion
Right.
and traditional thought.
Right.
So we were the best prepared for it. Plus, we were in a position where both of us were in an area called Special Projects. Special Projects was created to handle the major investigations that other departments were requesting, criminal investigations. And at the time, I was a certified criminal investigator, having gone through the school at Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So we just said, "Oh, that's cool," And I think we both thought we're going to be the X-Files.
Right. With the Navajo fox molder, and that's awesome.
So after that, we almost immediately received our first case, which was over 30 people in the Shiprock area having sightings of Bigfoot. And we went over there and we did basically a 3-day, 2-night investigation on Bigfoot.
So I want to stop here, and I want to do something because I feel like you have a lot of amazing stories to tell. Let's right there. What does that look like? What is an investigation, and especially your first investigation? How did you approach a 2-night, 3-day investigation into a cryptid creature such as quote unquote Bigfoot?
Okay, what we did, since we were in charge of this thing, is we set out observation posts at night. These were armed with rangers that had, between all the rangers, we had 3 ITT FLIR sets. These are basically $20,000 forward-looking infrared systems.
Correct.
We also, every tactical officer, I think there were 7 of us, had the PVS 14 night vision monocular that we also use. So we had officers out at night that could basically see in the night with light amplification. Then during the day, these officers would go to the different residences. What they taught me in criminal investigations, they have an acronym called GOYACOD, which means get off your A and knock on doors.
Okay.
And so we went basically through the whole community, knocking on doors and asking people about their sightings or what they had heard or seen. And we got lots and lots of stories. At the end of that, we tracked, we found footprints, we got hair samples off the barbed wire fences that this thing stepped over. We saw one place where a huge log was in a boggy area. And this thing had literally picked this log up that was half buried in the mud and just picked it up and flung it to the side. And it ended up 4 or 5 feet away on one pole of that, or one side of the pole. And the Bigfoot experts told us that it was looking for grubs. We found foot track evidence with stride distances of 5 feet. Just huge footprints that we tracked into the brush, into the tamaracks. The whole time we were getting bit up by mosquitoes and stuff. So we did find evidence and we did get DNA samples. And
Okay.
those samples were sent off and came back unknown carnivore.
Unknown carnivore. Now, are you using reservation lab or a U.S. lab?
This was a private U.S. lab,
Okay.
and you have to understand that when the lab sends this DNA to the database is composed of DNA samples from animals all around the world.
Right.
So for them to come up with unknown carnivore is amazing. You know that now they have mitochondrial DNA tests, and we didn't run any of that type.
Right.
We just ran a basic DNA profile.
Interesting.
But it should have showed up. You know, if it was an ape, it would have told us what type.
Exactly. Exactly. And like I said, the fact that that is, I mean, people often in this community, the skeptical people in the community, they say there's no evidence to suggest that there's anything, anything such as cryptids or non-human intelligence. But from your first case, you have evidence, like literal evidence of an unknown cryptid creature who I'm sorry, I don't even think you said what what actually happened to prompt the case. But it wasn't the same one with the grandpa and grandma, right?
It was a different one.
It was a different one, but it's still this thing, stepped over the corral, grabbed an animal, and stepped back over it, took off, and then left hair behind, and that's the hair that you had to analyze, right?
Well, in the case of the shiprock case,
Yeah.
actually, it was up closer to Bloomfield, New Mexico, which is close to Farmington. This thing stepped over a barbed wire fence, not to get at sheep, but just to travel.
Oh, it was just traveling. Okay.
Yeah, and as it stepped over, the barbed wire picked up some of the hair and pulled it out.
Wow.
In the case of the old couple, they had a wooden corral made out of little, like poles.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, okay, quite fascinating. So, is it? And again, you've grown up on the res. Stanley is grown up on the res. So again, this is kind of like, does this freak you out, or does this kind of just solidify the fact that there are things that do go bump in the night?
Well, like I said, we knew about them for a long, long time. The people on the Navajo reservation, they just say, yeah, he's out there. You leave him alone, he'll leave you alone. And that's it. And they'll also tell you never look at it in the eyes, because if you look at it in the eyes, it can take your mind over. Now, that statement always puzzled me until I spoke to a medicine man. And he told me that Bigfoot had interactions with the Navajo people all the way back to the 1600s. And he told me a story that just north of Gallup, Navajos were riding horses because they had gotten them from the Spanish that came through looking back when they were looking for Cibola, the seven cities of gold. And so, of course, they acquired horses. I don't know how, but they got them.
Through trade.
And they were riding these.
Yeah.
They saw Bigfoot near where they lived. A bunch of men rode out there on the horses, and they roped it. And they specifically said they used braided horsehair lariats to rope it with. They said that this thing sat down being roped, and in the midst of them spoke to them in Navajo and said, if you will take me to Mesa Verde and let me go, I will not come this way again and trouble you. Now,
What?
what's amazing about that story, and later on I thought about this, because as an investigator, you're trying to put information together to make sense. It
Absolutely.
occurred to me that Bigfoot is telepathic because Navajo, even for somebody trying to learn it, is a very, very difficult language. That's why it was so effective in World War II as a code. And
Right.
and you know, you don't just start speaking it. So what
Okay.
happens is that if it looks you in the eye, it can communicate with you in what you perceive to be your own language.
But
And
it's
I just find that amazing.
but so wow. Wow. So was it so there was almost like a quid pro quo between early Navajo and these cryptid creatures. Like, hey, listen, let me go. I'm not trying to bother you guys. Um, you know, let me go, and I won't come back this way. We won't have any issues. So, would you say that kind of is that essentially what you're saying? There was this kind of quid pro quo between whatever this creature is and whatever they are and what they represent and the Navajo people. They coexisted.
Yeah, they did coexist. And it's my understanding that they rode with it between the horses, still roped, and went all the way up to Mesa Verde
Is
and
there anything
let it go there.
is there anything special about Mesa Verde that we should know about?
Mesa Verde is the where the cliff dwellers lived, and so there's even a more ancient civilization that had been gone, probably from 1070 A.D. They disappeared, and
Interesting.
they left all their ruins, just like Chaco Canyon. Um, so you know we don't know what the significance is, but there is something going on there.
Okay. Okay. So then, okay. So this is this is, if that's your first case, what happens next?
Oh, well, we had UFO cases. We had a rather famous one where a guy had one land about a quarter mile away from his house and come to his house in the middle of the night. And he was looking out through his window because he locked his doors. He knew they were coming. And there's a big, long story involved in that. That you can, probably here on one of our other deals. But long story short, he was looking through the window and he saw what he called little children at 12:30, 1:30 in the morning. And he's got no electricity except for these little lights, solar lights around his house. And he is getting upset. What are these little children doing? He said they were small, about
Right.
3.5, 4 feet tall. They had big heads, they had big black eyes, and they wore a skin tight, either white or light gray outfit on them. And, he went out the front door and went around the house to try to, because they were in the back. And he
Okay.
tried to turn the corner and surprise them with a flashlight. And he says that he tripped on the concrete steps behind his house and fell down. The guy's, in his mid 80s at the time. And so, and I know any fall like that
It's
can
going to
be
severely,
disastrous.
yeah.
Right. And when he looked up, he says these things were in line and drifting back up the hill like they were straddling something.
What? Drifting up the hill? Do you mean
Yeah,
like levitating off the ground to a degree, or
that's correct.
what the?
And they made no sound. Um, as far as I think, I'm just making a supposition, is that they were on some kind of a vehicle.
Got it.
And if you
So
think about it,
got
our
it.
Navy SEALs do that today. They ride on the tubes.
Exactly. I was literally just going to bring that up, and then there. I'm sure you heard about this case. The case in what was it, Brazil, South America, where the face peeler things, that whole not the all that story. Did you hear that?
I'm not sure. There's so many of them.
Well, this was recent, like really recent, where
Oh, okay. I don't think
the
I've heard that one yet.
yeah, the government tried to explain it away as mercenaries with jet packs. That was the official narrative that they put forward. It was pirates with jet packs, but these things were coming down, and they were trying to take biological material from the people there, and they call them face peelers. I mean, but again, it kind of just drives me back to this notion that on the res in South America, in these places that have very rich and long history, especially history that incorporates their maybe religious or their creation uh, lore, the more they're okay with this kind of thing, and it doesn't completely shatter their paradigm. It's part of everyday life.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm going to digress just a little bit here.
Oh, please
One of
do.
the things that we attempted to do was to investigate these cases in a thorough manner using the laws of legal evidence. What we look for in statements and everything else was to vet the people that we talked to. Some of the questions were very embarrassing.
Of course,
Um,
naturally.
and we would tell them up front, these are going to be really embarrassing, but we'd ask them, do you use drugs, recreational drugs?
Right.
Do you use prescription medication? Do you use alcohol? When was the last time you had any of those? And what kind were they?
Were you drinking
We
during the
were,
event?
and just like an interrogation, you read body language. And
Absolutely.
so we would look for facial tics, expressions, the eyes, even the pupils dilating, um, anything that would tell us that the person is making a misleading statement or an out and out, lie to us. And so it was rather thorough. Um, I was a class 3 technical accident investigator. And when you investigate accidents, you don't immediately run to the public and say, what did you see?
Right.
You look at the evidence that's on the roadway and you interpret that evidence based on your knowledge, and you come up with what happened, and then you go see if the witness statements fit what you see on the roadway as skid marks and scuff marks and gouges and things like that.
Exactly. So you're coming at this from the perspective of, if I had to go to court, I could present my case and basically essentially prove beyond a reasonable doubt that something, maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but something is happening.
That's correct. You investigate, you put away personal biases. I mean, you personally might think this person's nuts,
Right.
but you don't allow that to color what you're investigating. You just let the facts lead you and let the cards fall where they will.
what is you talked about that obviously you talked about that case just a minute ago with the going up the hill. What obviously like I said, we just spoke about the UFO sightings on Navajo land. But is there one that sticks out the most? Something that was like that you could take to court and say we have enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this occurred the way the witness is described?
I would say the majority of the cases that we worked, we could say that. There were a tremendous number of what we classified as flybys. This is somebody that sees a UFO over on this side, and they say, okay, it flew from here
to here,
over to here. And I saw it for maybe 5 seconds. And,
right.
So those, yeah,
you can't really like,
you can't do much.
You can't do much with, and that's the thing, with these sightings. And, fortunately, the rise of technology and the ability of people to have a camera in their pocket. But even then, we don't get, as much evidence as we think we might. And nowadays, we have a different problem, with people faking things. But these flybys, yeah, I understand that. There's not much you can do to investigate that unless you have a time machine. And, we don't currently. Not that we know of.
And we've also been asked by a lot of people, well, how come they don't take cell phone pictures? And the thing is when you see a UFO flying through the sky, it already looks like a dot. And you take a picture with a cell phone and you try to blow it up, it becomes pixelated.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
now you just see.
For reference,
right.
And I didn't mean to cut you off. I think we're having a little bit of an internet lag over each other, so I apologize for that. But I'll definitely want to be flying you to Boston or me coming there to have an in-person discussion after this, because I could talk with you for hours. But like you had just said, next time, just go try to take a picture of the moon, and a clear picture of the moon on a phone. It doesn't work. Even though your eyes are seeing this HD, beautiful, large moon, your camera shows it as just like this small, white, bright light.
Right. So, like I said earlier, most officers that work on the Navajo Nation have had experiences with skinwalkers, with UFOs, with all of this, Bigfoot, and they just don't talk about it. The only difference is that Stan and I were assigned these cases on top of our regular work, and we investigated them thoroughly. We wrote reports, and at the end, we decided to talk about these things. And the purpose for us speaking about it was just to say these things are there. And as far as we can tell, they're real.
Wow. So was there any point where leadership didn't want or didn't necessarily agree with you guys talking about it publicly? Because obviously that has to come back on the Navajo Nation as a sovereign entity, as a place, as a a thing inside of the United States that has a reputation, and obviously trying to protect that. Did you ever face any like, hey, please don't do this?
Well, at our division level, we had other program managers that would laugh and ridicule and stuff like that. But we were actually encouraged and ordered to do these cases, and we did. No matter how fantastical it might seem, I mean, you get somebody that said that they saw a ghost. How do you handle that?
Yeah, exactly.
And yet we go do the interviews, take the case, and sometimes the things would happen right in front of us. And we'd go, there's no explanation for that. We had one case where janitors were working and they saw there's a 2-story building with stairs. And up at the second landing, there's metal railing. And they saw, they're cleaning, so nobody should be in the building. And they saw a woman with a long dress. They said it was light colored clothing. And she held her arms out at her side, turned sideways, and fell through the railing to the floor.
Whoa.
And the girl that was working screamed, and the guy came running in, the other housekeeping, and there was nothing there on the ground. And so obviously they were pretty freaked out. After that, they would not work in a building after the sun went down. So
Really?
that's how much it affected them.
Wow. And I mean, so we've okay. It's kind of interesting because in Navajo, like in the oral tradition, there are stories of star people. And I mean, do you see the parallels between, the mythology and what, the witnesses that you're talking about are seeing?
Well, in the case of ghosts, we think that we came up with a working theory for all of this that explains pretty much everything. And,
right. So it's all of it being connected. Because one thing I say a lot, and again, I don't mean to interject, but I think the UFOs, the cryptids, the paranormal, what we perceive as the paranormal and the supernatural, I think they're all linked to some degree. I just don't know how and exactly why. But again, I'm kind of with you that there's things that overlap between all of them.
Well, we started looking at the Navajo creation story.
Right.
That tells of the Navajo people starting off in a world of darkness. They moved through several different worlds. And in 2 of the worlds, they describe going through a hole in the sky into the next world. And then they end up in this world, which they call the shining world. And we started looking at that and thinking, what if they're talking about going through a dimensional gate or a portal? And it started to make sense to us because it could account for UFOs popping into existence and disappearing or fading out. It could account for Bigfoot being tracked and the tracks disappear in trackable ground. And it could even account for stories of ghosts and poltergeist activity. And so we started thinking maybe this is the answer. So we started coming up with that theory in 2006. To this date, we haven't seen anything that tells us otherwise.
And now you must, I know there's like, and we can get into this as well. I know there is a bit of, I don't want to call it tension, but maybe it is, maybe tension is the best word. But there's a divide between the Navajo, not all native tribes, I would say, most native tribes, and the United States of America, like the actual entity, the United States of America, because of obviously how everything was handled in, I don't want to get too political or anything like that, but in the beginning, when the white man first came in, right? Everyone knows the story, right? Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and we invaded a land and took it over. Now then we relegated these reservations and put the native people on them and said, good enough, right? And the answer is obviously no, it's not good enough. It's kind of makes me think about, that story you told with the cryptid and the deal that they came to eventually, right? Is like, hey, we're both here. I won't bother you. Don't bother me. And we'll just coexist. But that's not exactly how it went down. So,
Right.
there's a divide. So is there any, again, I come back to this. Now in
Well,
U.S. government, we are seeing David Grush testify that the U.S. government has non-human biologics and craft of non-human origin. I mean, does that feel like some sort of vindication when you hear that?
well, everybody is waiting for something that they call disclosure. And everyone in the country is just sitting on the edge of their seats saying, when is the government going to fess up? Now, for myself and Stan and for other native tribes, they are not waiting for disclosure. They've known for hundreds of years that these things exist. And so they don't need the government, to tell them anything. And we have a very strong distrust of the U.S. government because, of 6,000 treaties being made since 1492, and not one of them was ever kept. So, that's a pretty impressive track record for treaties. And so everybody complains, that the government isn't telling the truth. Well, we know that they're not telling the truth. And we
Because
just
they've never
figure
been
it's
straight
gonna,
with you guys. Yeah.
that's right. So the thing is that this stuff does exist. We have had visitations for hundreds and hundreds of years by star people. And I saw a picture earlier that you had of some dancers. They're called Yebiche.
Which one?
Not that, no, those are old Navajos. But there was one that they had black masks on. And yeah, there. Now, this
Okay.
picture is put up a lot of times, and they say, "Oh, these are skinwalkers." You see that on TV. If you
All
look
the
it up
time.
on the internet, this is the pictures you'll find. But these are Yebiche dancers. The Yebiche represent the holy people that came to the Navajo to teach them how to live, how to have morals, how to do things, and give them wisdom. Now, the Yebiche are usually 10 to 12 different dancers. And what's interesting about them is that the last one in the line of dancers, they always call the clown. The clown does everything backwards. He doesn't listen. If they tell him to do something, he does something else. He chases the girls in the crowd. Um, and he's just totally irresponsible.
Right.
He actually represents the five-fingered people. That's you and me. So
Whoa.
this is a commentary by the holy beings saying that this is our people. We're the clown. We don't know how to listen. We don't know how to take instruction. And we
Wow.
war with each other. We kill each other. We steal from each other. And we shouldn't, because that's not what the holy people taught us.
And we chase after things when it's detrimental to our, our path in life. And yeah, I mean, and that in a lot of these oral traditions that have been passed, oral histories that have been passed down throughout the native tribe, I mean, a lot of that's not public information. We can't just, there's stuff that that we can't, and we shouldn't know. And you keep it at and I say that sparingly, but the Navajo, do they think, do they protect this information because it's sacred to them, or do they protect it from people because they don't trust what they'll do with that information?
Well, it's a combination of not trusting people with that information. And at the same time, you have to understand that from around 1864, it was decided that the native peoples in the United States would be stripped of their culture. There was a theory that America was a great melting pot. And if we could just, even though put them on reservations, if we could incorporate them, melt them into society, that these tribes would cease to exist and we could
Yeah.
take over those lands. They found out that America was not a melting pot, it was a stew pot. And there were chunks. You go up to Minnesota, you'll find, European people up there. If you go, you'll find Puerto Ricans, you'll find Italians, you'll find Germans, you'll find, every type of ethnicity you can imagine. There's chunks of them in the United States. But we were told, even through religion, that we could not practice our traditional ways, that we had to give them up in the name of religion and learn to be white people. And so that's why they don't trust anybody with this knowledge anymore. It's just not open and out there.
Right. Now back to this story, the creation story. The way you explained it, the way you kind of walked us through it, and you said that they came through a hole in the sky, and it kind of, the way I pictured it in my head was maybe maybe an interdimensional portal, but also, could it be maybe that they were underground, in the earth, and then coming up through different worlds, or potentially, we hear these stories that the inside the earth there's, that I don't know, I'm losing my train here, but that there's something underneath, that these things may be ultra terrestrial, meaning, they live amongst us without our knowledge. And could one of those other worlds be right under us, and we not know it?
There are stories that all Indian tribes have an internal history that they recount of a flood. Now, this is all around the world. And in the Navajo story, they climb up on the top of Shiprock, and that saves the people. The Hopis have a story of being taken by the ant people underground, and the entrance is sealed. So I think a lot of those stories probably come from different Indian tribes that may have been taken underground during this time.
So even in Native American, again, it's not one size fits all. It's different regions, different tribes, different perspectives, different stories. But again, I like that you bring up the flood, because in school, quote unquote, they taught us that, the natives had zero interaction with anyone from the other side of the world. That same goes with, the Mayans and, Sumerians. Like those, they didn't mingle. There was no connection. Yet we see the same story about a flood told, and with your archaeological background, you must know this as well. In the fossil record, it shows that there's some sort of cataclysm that happened. It happened around 13,000 years ago, and seems to be part of that younger dryas impact? And I mean, what do you think about all that? I mean, is that something that you do kind of subscribe to and think is accurate?
One of the things I found from working in the archaeological field is that archaeologists go to college. Their professor teaches them that this is the method and this is what I ascribe to. And so in every archaeological report that they're doing where they're going to do a dig and they're putting this paper together, it usually has a sentence in there that says, "We expect to find." And so they're talking about, what culture they're digging up, and they already have a preconceived idea of the things that they're expecting to find based on what their professors taught them. If they find anything unusual in there, they don't, really put it down as a discovery to be investigated further. They'll just say religious object.
Right.
And
Right.
but we have found, the archaeologists have found domesticated turkeys with pens. They've found parrots. Now, where do parrots come from? South America. They
Right.
found obsidian
Right.
from South America that has a greenish tinge to it. That's only found around Mexico. They found pottery from South America and shells. So, there were trade routes,
Right.
extensive trade routes going all through what is now the United States and Canada and South America.
Right.
And then there's evidence, even the Chinese anchors that were found off the coast of California, that explain, back a lot earlier, that there was interaction and monolithic mounds that were built, in the areas of Florida all the way to through the Gulf Coast area. So lots of information that looks at it and says there could have been a lot of interaction going on.
And I mean, it seems to me, again, to me as a, traditional white man, right? It seems to me that, we come into this world, at least us right now, we come into this world and we are taught from an early age that everything is kind of, it's black and white, right? It's it's either there or it isn't, right? And
Right.
it's not until you have one of these experiences, whether it be spiritual, whether it be otherworldly, it's not until you actually go up against something that you can't explain. And trust me, your brain does everything in its power to try to explain it away and try to rationalize it. But there's some things that it forces you almost to see that there's so much more gray than we were ever led to believe. And I think it almost was by design to, because if everyone had psychic abilities and if everyone had all the knowledge of this really rich and amazing free energy and all and everything that we seem to talk about in this community. It seems if we all had these, abilities, that the world would be a radically different place. And there would be no power vacuum, right? So it seems like we're almost being cattle. We're herding. They're herding the general population and
Oh yeah,
atrophying these.
yeah. We're being led by fear. Um, that's why you see terrible headlines in the news every day. Um, if you were to go to the UK, you'd get a whole different view of what the United States stands for, and it's very different.
Right.
And to a lot of people, we are the ugly Americans.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's so much of this stuff that, and we are, in effect, we are exactly what we've been taught and what we believe.
Mm.
And a lot of times there's no changing that. We don't want to look up. People do not look up at the sky.
Yeah,
Now
they
in the
won't.
cities, granted, you can't see the sky because of all the light pollution. But if you ever go out to the desert and see the sky, uh, it's amazing to understand that Navajos in the past have Navajo names for constellations we cannot see with the naked eye.
Wow. Is that really? Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. And they didn't have telescopes back then.
And I was
So
just
they have a deep knowledge of this stuff.
right, right. And then I mean, you talk about like the Dogon tribe. I said it in the intro, the Dogon, and the knowledge of the Sirius star, the Sirius B, which isn't visible. Like it's like
Right.
who is coming down? Who's giving them this information? Who's and then you start looking at these creation myths and you start to get the answer. And again, it seems deliberate in nature that deliberate in its nature that we're taught that none of these places ever talk to each other. They never had any interaction because if they did, then it changes everything. It changes history. Everything needs to be rewritten, and they build these same sort of structures everywhere across the earth, and they seem to build it in hopes or in anticipation of something coming back, the thing that taught it, right? Like almost like what they would consider their god, insert cultural god here, whether it's the sky people, the ant beings, the Anunnaki. It's all seems to be something similar. It's a non-human intelligence. So has the word become blurred between God and what we call alien?
That could very well be. Um, we look at anything that probably has a higher technology than we have. Everything they do seems like it's magic
Yep.
because we don't understand it. But you could draw a parallel and say, what if I went to a ant mound and I pointed to my digital watch here and said, let me explain to you how a digital watch works. There'd
They
be
would
no comprehension to start with an ant mound.
no.
Maybe that's how the aliens view us as, bacteria covering the earth. And
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to not
so,
think that. I tend to not think that because I think now I'd really like to hear what the Navajo and so what is consciousness? This question it's very hard to ask and to answer. So, in your best words, with given what you know and your background, uh, consciousness seems to be something that's unique, and doesn't.
yeah,
I think it's special, right? I think all life is special, but I think again, uh, we are conscious in a different way than say a dog is. That's not to say a dog is stupid either. But uh, dolphins. Some say dolphins are smarter than people. Well, they're not building cities as far as we know under the water. So to get to a degree that we've gotten to, we've got to be special in some sort of way. And so what do you think is consciousness, and does it survive? Is it eternal?
Well, we call it spirit,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
we
Sorry.
have an ability to decide what we're going to do. There's religions that teach that evil must be destroyed. Uh, the Navajo people and other tribes look at it as that evil exists along with good. And it's up to you to have a moral compass and decide which way you're going to lean on that. So there is choice. And in that choice, one of the things that we found out, because we had to, in doing ghost investigations, uh, there were a lot of questions. Are these things just repeating what they did in the past? Can they actually interact with us? And we found evidence to suggest that they can actually interact with us. Um, we also started looking at this idea that the spirit, or what we call spirit or consciousness, is energy. And interestingly enough, when you die, energy cannot be destroyed.
Destroyed. Nor.
It can change state, but it can't be destroyed, nor can it be created.
So it
It
always
already
existed.
exists. Right.
And it always
So
existed.
so this explains how places can be haunted, because when people die, especially violent deaths, those energies leave and they attach to inanimate objects like geologic surfaces. They can attach to inanimate objects, dolls and other things, and just be in that vicinity. And so the Navajo, they don't talk about um, things
Let's go
like that.
back. Right.
Yeah, just momentarily. Um, they don't talk about stuff like that, because to even mention a deceased name is to invite them to come back. You don't go to the graveyard and cry, because that's telling them you want them to come home with you. Things like that.
Oh. Wow.
So, you may go to the services themselves, you may go to, but graveside is considered a taboo. And after that, you don't speak their names ever again, because to speak their names is to invite them to come back.
To invoke them in. Yes. Right. That makes
Right.
sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And there's a lot of practicality to it, even within the Navajo clans. And there's something like 30 something clans. Each clan had a group of people within the clan to handle the burials. You didn't touch the dead bodies by yourself. You had other people come in, kind of like your clan funeral director. You
right.
have specialized people to come in and handle that burial for you, and that's all they did.
That's a really, really. So, almost in a way that ties with something again that I think you've been to Skinwalker Ranch a few times.
Yes.
And I've had this theory bouncing around, because I grew up in I am in Massachusetts. Obviously, King Philip's War happened here between the natives and the early settlers. So that happens. Then the Salem witch trials happen. There's a place called the Bridgewater Triangle. There's obviously Salem, where the witch trials took place, but witchcraft was, people were being accused of it throughout the region. And where these atrocities occurred, it seems the land itself holds almost like a resonant frequency of like this really impactful event, because I've talked about this in the show before, but there was even a study done where they spoke to water, and when they froze it, anything that had a good connotation, that they spoke to it, because they spoke to it before they froze it. And anything that had a positive connotation, the crystals would be very beautiful. Anything that had a negative connotation, like hatred or war, froze in these really irregular, unnatural ways. So what their conclusion is that your thoughts, your actions, and your intent, they affect the matter around you. So in essence, your thoughts and your intent matter, literally. They literally affect the matter around you. That's why so many people recall, having dreams about the planes hitting the towers on 9/11, or premonitions of something like that. So there's definitely a connection somewhere with.
We can manifest things just by speaking. And, we often
Yep.
tell people that words have power, and that's why they call it spelling. You can create a spell just based on words.
Holy shit.
So if you think about it, you can manifest. But if you have ill intentions toward people, you can also manifest bad things for them.
You just
And
blew my
basically,
mind. I never put that together. Spelling. A spell.
right.
Holy shit. I'm sorry for the abrupt, like, what the fuck moment, but what the what what the hell? What, that is such a, and that, like, witchcraft, right? I'm sure you dealt with this on the ranch. I mean, on the res. There's this show that I was watching, about, it's Dark Skies, and it's
Right.
Joe Leopold, and Jim Chi. You remind me a lot of, obviously, Jim Chi, in your ways. That show really got me back into wanting to talk to you. And so I will say that show is kind of what, like, sent me on the path of trying to find you again, because I had always been really fascinated with you. But
yeah, we actually got Stan and the Chief Ranger got to sit down with Tony Hillerman in person and
wow,
meet with him. And they
it's such a good
informed
show.
him that Jim Chi should have never been a police officer.
Never.
He should have been a ranger, because police officers, I've seen police officers literally turn the other way and walk away from something because it was an archaeological site or it had some taboo with traditional Navajo belief. Skinwalkers, they won't even talk about them,
Really?
except amongst themselves.
Right.
They'll
Right.
tell you all kinds of amazing things and encounters, but they generally keep quiet. So we've had situations like that, and so if you look at Tony Hillerman's last book that he wrote, in the foreword, he mentions the Navajo Rangers. And, so I'm in the process of writing a book right now. And the working title is called Navajo Ranger. And underneath, a really handsome picture of a ranger, probably won't be me. Somebody wearing a Smokey the Bear hat, with his eyes shaded, in a desert background, and underneath it'll say the true story of the real Jim Chi.
That's a really, yeah, that's really good. So you have, because in that show, and I wanted to ask this, because in that show, it's they just touch that line. And they don't go over it, like, in both seasons. It seems like it got a little bit more in each season, but, like, that paranormal aspect, they definitely imply with witchcraft a lot, but they don't overtly incorporate it in the overall story, aside from, like, you just kind of knowing, like, like they gave you that wink, like pay pay attention to what's going on. So that's what really like I really enjoyed about the story, but I think they need to take a side because I mean either include because there was like a great opportunity. So did you ever come across like literal witchcraft?
Oh yes, yes.
Like
Navajo
like
witchcraft is what we call it.
so
Um,
what
I'm not referring to Wiccans. Um, which is a whole different subject. So don't get me wrong. We say witchcraft, but we're referring to Navajo witchcraft or
right.
anti. Um, in the Navajo tradition, first man and first woman were taught by the holy people how to shape change. And this allowed them to get close to deer and other animals to take them for sustenance. Later on, they used it in times of war to go spy on the enemy. Now, somewhere later, it became a source of negative. We call it negative energy, where somebody just devotes themselves completely to this, and people die. And poisons are made. They're able to shapeshift into other things, other animals, and is still prevalent to this day. In podcasts, we tell people do not go looking for them because if you do, you may find them, and
You're not
it's
gonna
not
like
going to
it.
be a good outcome. Yeah.
So
So yeah, we have people that do that.
are all skinwalkers witches?
Yeah, in the idea of Navajo witchcraft, there's several different types. There is a somebody that just learns how to shapeshift, and that's all they do.
Okay.
And so they go out, they terrorize whole communities. That's a source of power. You have a type that are medicinal. They know everything about plants and how to make
Mm-hmm.
poisons and how to make healing things. There are others that do what we call frenzy witchcraft, which is much more involved. This involves curses on people. Um, this involves digging up dead bodies and stealing the jewelry and
Oh, and
selling the jewelry in border towns away from the reservation. And which is very, very taboo, to do.
right. You said even going to the graves and you
Right.
know, right? So if you then you go start digging up the grave, I mean, you've got to be working. And anyone like people get I get upset with people because if you don't think evil exists, like real pure evil you can feel that when you walk in a place or you see, this certain person, um, that the room changes literally,
Yeah.
or that evil you can feel. If you don't think that's real, then you are living a lie. You're happily naive about it. Um, how many times working, in with the Rangers, did you go into a place and feel this is not a good place? I should not be here.
There were many times that happened. And, we call it our sixth sense.
Mm.
Uh, when you're in law enforcement, you start to rely on it a lot. And what we found, I mean, I'm going down the hallway. This kid had shot at a lot of people, trying to kill them. And we were after him, and he took off from the house and took off into the backcountry. So they had a big manhunt going. And I mentioned to a couple of the other officers, I says, we need to check the house again. I just felt that he might have gone back to the house. So we're searching the house again, and I'm going down the hallway to the bedroom. And as I got halfway down that hallway, something told me, don't go there. And I started backing up. And I got back to the end of the hallway. And I motioned, when you're doing SWAT work, you do a lot of hand signals. Everything's silent. And I told the other officers, I said, come up here. I says, I can't see. I've got something further up the hall. We got in there and we called to him by his name and told him, we know you're in there, come out and leave the gun behind. After a couple of minutes, that guy came out of the back room and he had been armed with a pistol. And we took him into custody. But if I had gone just bebopping down that hall and gone in there, I would have exposed myself in what we call the fatal funnel, which is where the doorway is. If you want to ambush somebody, that's the place to do it.
Right.
And so, I didn't want to get shot, even if I did have a vest. So, but things like that happen all the time. And you start to rely on that ability that you have just to survive sometimes.
Right. So what do you take of, are you, you did grow up, so you said you spent time off the res during the year, and then you spent summers on the res.
Right.
Are you a religious man, John?
Actually, I am.
Okay.
I grew up in a church. It was an independent church, but it was a native church in Los Angeles. And this church is more closely aligned with Southern Baptist doctrine. So after that, from 1976 to 78, I went to a Bible school where I studied theology. I studied the Latin Vulgate. I studied the Greek Septuagint.
Wow.
So I did a lot of study in that area. All the people I went to school with became preachers, and I went into law enforcement instead. So I do have a background, and it's always fun because I hear people say, in the comments sometimes, you need Jesus Christ. You're going to hell, and all this stuff. And I could argue doctrine. I could go into apologetics, and and the reason that I'm a born again Christian is because I cannot refute two things. And if you wanted to destroy Christianity, all you have to do is refute two things. Number one, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Number two, the conversion of Saul of Tarsus to the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus. If you can refute either one of those, you will have destroyed Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody can refute it. They've had people like Dr. Simon Greenlee, who put Harvard Law School on the map, take his own money and do his own research, and came back and said, evidence such as the resurrection of Christ cannot be disputed in any court of law. And he ended up becoming a Christian because of his work.
Right.
So I look at that kind of stuff and there's nothing there. Now, doctrine-wise, you can get into a lot of different arguments.
Right. Now,
because every group has a different doctrine.
does it conflict? Do your religious beliefs do they conflict with Navajo tradition or anything like that?
I am very respectful of Navajo tradition because I've had to work within those confines for so long. I do not put it down. There's a lot of it that's practical. I will use smudging and smoke myself. I will carry arrowheads for protection. I have turquoise on my bracelet, on my ring. For that purpose, turquoise protects you, traditionally in Navajo culture. So there are a lot of things. Smudging, if you notice that even the Catholic Church does a form of that, they have an altar boy walking down the middle of the aisle carrying an urn on chains, and he swings it back and forth with the smoke. So smudging has been used all through history through different cultures. And now they're finding out that sweetgrass, sage, and cedar have a medicinal property. They're antimicrobial. I just like the smell. But I pray and I use an eagle feather to smudge
Right.
with. And when I'm done, I say in the name of Jesus Christ.
So it's like you're bringing it together, and yeah, I like that. I do. I like that because I think there's what people often will do is say it's either you have to be one or the other. I don't think that's the case, and I don't think
No.
that if I've had my own UFO, like nuts and bolts UFO sighting, right? But then when I was in the room when my mother died, I had what you definitely call or label something more of a paranormal, supernatural experience. And, I'm grateful to have had both of those because, again, it tells me that again, the world isn't black and white, right? And I was lucky enough to grow up in that kind of environment where I wasn't shaped into something or someone that was unable and unwilling. Some people are just unwilling to allow for the idea of anything other than the paradigm they live in. So the thought of angels or demons or aliens, all of that is quote unquote nonsense. When in fact it's quite the opposite. It's not nonsense. It's talked about by every culture. It's talked about. I mean, there's so much I could get into, but is
Right.
it of do you think these beings that have come here, that they are responsible for us being here, like in a way that they played a direct role in our creation to some degree?
If you really think about it, they came here to provide knowledge, moral knowledge, knowledge of how to live, uh, knowledge of what not to do. Um, there's just so much. And that stuff, you can't gain it just by yourself. You just can't look up in the sky and say, I suddenly know everything.
Right.
It has to be built on. And so I think that there was a long, long period of time uh, where this knowledge was possessed. And it wasn't just one meeting. It was a whole series of stuff. And, in thinking about what you were talking about earlier, one of the reasons I think that governments do not want to talk about, you know, uh, entities is that in some ways we rely on flags and countries, and we go to war with other countries because we have political aspirations, and war is politics carried out by other means.
Yep.
So, we have this situation in the world today where we have enemies that are traditional enemies. And if there was suddenly some other race of people coming from outside of our world, all these countries would disappear. We would all be united
as
to
humans.
fight one thing. So it's a way of control to say that there are no other entities out there other than us. We're it,
Yeah.
in the
Top of the food
universe.
chain. Yeah, top of the food
You
chain.
know,
We are.
right.
I think
Yeah,
that is
Fermi doctrine aside, right?
right. And one of the and that's one of the things I was getting at was the fact that so I don't understand why governments or whoever began whoever is indeed responsible, whatever entity, whether that was the Vatican and the church from the beginning, which I do think there's a strong possibility that the church had something to do with it, and putting the
Well,
kibosh
not
on it.
only the Catholic Church, you had the Church of England, you had
Right.
and a lot of people with all the political stuff going on now, they say, oh, we're a Christian nation. We're an evangelical Christian nation. But if you really look at the history, our founding fathers were what they called deists. A deist is somebody who believes that God set everything in motion and then stepped back and said, it's all up to you guys now.
Let it be, right? Right.
Let it be. And that's our nation was founded by a group of deists. And it had nothing to do with evangelical Christianity. That came much later. So, and I always laugh about there's this long joke that was done by a comedian where he sees a guy ready to jump off the bridge and he starts trying to have a conversation and he says, well, I'm Christian. How about you? And the guy says, I'm Christian too. Oh, what kind? Catholic, Protestant? And they keep going down the line until they find out they're both Baptists and what convention of Baptists and what just all the way down to the nitty gritty. And at the end, he asks them, what group are you with? And he tells them, and he pushes them off the bridge and says, die, heretic.
Oh my God.
And that's kind of what our country is. We look at it and we say, well, you got to believe like I believe. And
right.
that's not true.
It's becoming a very big problem in the country, is that we are no longer able to have discussion with contention now, because if you believe if you have a differing belief than I do, then you are no longer my equal, you're my opponent, right? And that I grew up, at least I remember growing up in a world where discourse was part of life, where you might have been a Democrat or Republican or Navajo or anything. You have any affiliation, but you could have a discussion and walk, and you might not agree in that discussion. You might not even agree walking away, but you walk away after a handshake. That's no longer the case.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, but it's like a pendulum. The pendulum is swinging one way, and it'll eventually start swinging back the other way. Equal and opposite is what physics teaches.
Absolutely. So, and getting back to some of the more weird stuff as we round out, was there a case that sticks out to you as one that maybe changed the course of your life, or had an impact on you more so than any other?
Well,
Or even just
there's
maybe even an experience after the fact, after you're out. Like, is there any moment like that for you?
yeah, I get asked that a lot, and the story that I relate is how I was leaving early in the morning before sunup. I travel north, and I'm going 47 miles to Kaikautsmithy, which is called New Arribe on the Hopi Reservation, and then I go west to Tuba City, another 68 miles. And I have a routine where I go to the local drive-through restaurant and I get a cup of coffee and my breakfast sandwich.
Hell
And
yeah.
I have just enough time to go across the street and park and wait for the gate to open up. On the way, the sun it's pre-dawn, so the sun is showing on the horizon, sunlight, but not the sun yet. And I looked in front of me and I got straight road for miles and miles. I look in the rearview mirror, miles and miles behind me of straight road. And I blinked. And when I opened my eyes, I was 15 more miles down the road, coming to a sharp left turn. Now, you have to understand that that road goes up and down. It goes around curves. It goes along cliffs. And back then, there were no guardrails. And I don't know how I made that 15 miles. And at first, I thought, did I just zone out completely and I'm just on autopilot? I got to Tuba City and I went through the drive-through, got my sandwich, got my coffee. I'm sitting at the gate. I was 45 minutes early instead of waiting there just for a few minutes and have them open the gate at 8. So I cannot, and there's no time change at that time. I cannot say what happened. I had people say, "Oh, the UFO snatched you and they put you back in the wrong time." I've had another person, very scientifically minded, that said I hit the event horizon of a microscopic black hole, and it changed time for me.
Whoa.
Still skeptical. I went to the Snippy conference, and a gentleman approached me after I told that story at the end, and he says, "I know what happened to you." And he proceeded to tell me that I basically teleported. And so far, that's the only explanation that I found. And in looking at this idea of teleportation, I found out that you can have variations in time. And now I tell people that it's just like Doctor Who. Time is this, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff that we don't
Right.
understand.
It's not
And
linear.
yeah, it's not linear. And that really brought me to the cusp of understanding that there's much, much more out here than we realize. And if we just opened up our eyes and let our curiosity lead us, we might get some answers.
There's no telling what a united humanity couldn't do. I'd be hard pressed. It reminds me of the story of the Tower of Babel, right?
Right.
A united humanity, it gets too close to the gods and it needs to be, struck down a peg and separated and divided by language, divided by culture. But I think one of the biggest messages that I've tried to send throughout conversations with, experiencers, members of Congress, scientists, academics, is that if we all stepped back and let our biases be, right? Check that at the door for a moment and step away and look around, because I think we
Yeah.
all have a piece of the story, and we're just, like you said, we need to open our aperture up a little bit so that we can get the full picture.
Yeah, I truly believe that what I found in my journey is that I had to look inside myself,
Bingo.
and I had to decide, you know, uh, how I was going to live from here on out. And, and you look at everything, how you think, um, just every aspect of your life and how you relate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was one question that I had. Oh man, now I just completely blanked on it because I went another way in my head. Um, if that's right. Have you, I think most people will know the story of the Skinwalker, right? And how it
Right.
came to be. The curse of the Skinwalker, at least in that Utah area, is that the thing that you know struck why Skinwalker Ranch is the way it is in terms of its location, because of the curse that was put on it through contention between tribes, and one puts a curse on the other.
Right.
But so is that it kind of seems like an oversimplification of it, but have you, first off, what is a skinwalker? Like I said, we've talked about it already a little bit, but what is that the right definition of a skinwalker? And have you ever come actually face to face with one of these things ever?
Oh, I've come to face with them many times, and I've investigated them. I found out in at least 8 cases who they were, their identities. And in one case, I put word out in the community that if you continue terrorizing people, I'm going to dime you out to the community and let them know who you are. In the Navajo tradition, if you find out the identity of the skinwalker and somebody goes up to them and say, I know who and what you are, that person will be dead within 3 days. And I've seen that happen before.
The person that knows?
The person who is the skinwalker. Because they're people just yeah. Unlike what you see on TV, they are not avatars. They are not these spirit things that run around. There are people just like you and me, flesh and blood, and they learn this stuff, and they get together and teach each other all these secrets. My grandfather was a medicine man early on in his life, and my one of my grandmother's brothers, and he became a Christian in his young life, probably about 25, 26. He was taught as a child to be a medicine man. And he told me that when you're taught to be a medicine man, you're taught the good things and the bad things. So he says you're taught everything.
Right.
Because you have to know how the curses are constructed in order to do something with them.
Counter it. And so you have to understand the curse to be able to, reverse engineer it.
Right. So with that said, he just told me, be very careful, be strong in your faith, because that's what's going to protect you. And so, like I said, I pray, I smudge myself. I take all the precautions. I've been to Skinwalker Ranch about 4 or 5 times now. Yeah. And I've never had anything negative happen to me. The last time I went up there, I felt like I was literally in a clear bubble of some kind, and that nothing was going to come and bother me. So,
interesting.
But getting back to the question, my personal research has found that there's a romantic story that goes around that's repeated often. It says that when the Navajos were being rounded up by the cavalry in 1864, they were forced marched to Bosque Redondo, New Mexico, and a lot of them died. It was kind of like the Bataan Death March, and by the time they got there, they were marched different directions. Some of them went through Santa Fe and were marched down the city streets, put on display. Some of them were just marched through the desert. And at the end of that thing, they were interred for 4 years. Supposedly, the government said that the Navajos are raiding and causing a lot of depredation and stolen livestock and all this other stuff. The real story behind it, I believe, is that in 1863, gold was discovered in Prescott, Arizona. A military assayer was on his way back to Washington and reported that the Navajo Nation has land up there that could contain gold.
Oh, no.
And so the government had to find a way, just like the Black Hills, to get rid of the natives. And so they sent a punitive military operation to do that. Now, the Utes actually come into this because they provided scouts for the military. Now, in those days, in the 1860s, that was an honorable job to be a scout for the military.
Right.
So the Utes rounded up the Navajos with the military and hunted them down. But you have to understand that the Utes and the Navajos were traditional enemies. And so the Navajos supposedly took this as an affront that the Utes were giving them payback.
Right.
And after the Navajos got done at Bosque Redondo in 1868, signed the treaty and were allowed to come back, the story is that they put a curse on the Ute land and said, you're going to have skinwalkers from now on. Now, with that story being out there, what I found out, because remember, I've had a career in archaeological law enforcement, so I had to learn about archaeology. And you had the Fremont people up in that area along with the Utes.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went up there, I found sites near the ranch that were set up as religious locations. And it occurred to me that all these sites circle that ranch area. However, what I found out is that the Fremont had been there and the Utes had been there, hundreds and hundreds of years.
Wow.
And they were already practicing protection for their tribe by having these ceremonies at these locations to hold back whatever evil that they were experiencing.
Right.
So I'm going, okay, it doesn't match up with the dates. And then later on, if you really look at Navajo history, you find out that after they got back in 1868, for 9 years, there was a roundup of suspected skinwalkers all over the reservation that were put together, kind of like Salem witch trials.
I was just gonna, oh my God, you read my mind a little bit. I was gonna say, sounds exactly like the witch trial.
So, did they have that big of a problem with Navajo witches? I don't think so. What I read between the lines and looking at the history is that there was a faction of Navajos that wanted to go to war with the United States after the treaty was signed, because they said that the treaty was not in the best interest of the Navajos and they should never have signed it. So there was a political faction that was active after they came back. And Manuelito, Ganado Mucho, all these chiefs that signed on to that treaty basically hunted them down, said, "You're a witch," and killed them. They said over 9 years, around 40 witches were rounded up and killed.
But there was an
And
ulterior motive.
yeah, I'm looking at the politics and thinking, how else, what better way to get rid of your political rivals
Right.
than to
Well,
stamp it out and execute them?
and that's what
Have
I
good
mean.
reason to do it.
And that's what I mean, because that's the same. It's very similar what happened in Salem. It was oftentimes it was either land grabs or political opponents, or you know, a woman that you know, there was ulterior motives of the people accusing the accused. And like,
Right.
does the land itself hold some sort of memory? Because we talk about time being not linear. Could that be what ghosts are? Is it replaying you know, some event that had a really, you know, tragic or terrible atrocity on it? And could the land hold some sort of like memory of that? And that's where the poltergeist activity comes from and stuff like that. I think, you know, that could be one way to look at it, obviously. But someone asked a great
Yeah.
question. Someone asked a great question. Now, in the Catholic Church with demons, there is such thing as, you know, how to essentially out the demon, right? To do this exorcise the demon from the individual. Now, a skinwalker is a little bit different, right? Because it's not something that's inhabiting it, or is it? And can they be exorcised, quote unquote?
With skinwalkers, you have to have a traditional practitioner do a ceremony, and that ceremony will protect the people. I've had it done for myself. It'll protect individuals. It'll protect places, and there are, you know, rules and things to abide by doing this. This is just for Navajo.
Right.
Every tribe in the United States has some type of shapeshifter. So when we talk about shapeshifters, you have them all over the United States. You have them in New Zealand and Australia, in Africa, in Europe. So it's, yeah, and in Asian countries. So it's nothing new. They're out there. So
but could they be redeemed?
Way.
Can a skinwalker be redeemed? Can they repent?
Redemption is there for everybody. It's up to the skinwalker to decide. I actually interviewed a skinwalker.
Oh,
it was a young kid that wanted to talk to me, and he told me a story that he was taught with two of his buddies how to do this stuff, and they would shape change and go run out into the community. That's another holy person there.
Yes.
Not a skinwalker.
Not a skinwalker. There's no real pictures, apparently.
No. But they were taught to do this. So they would go out and have fun because that's all they knew how to do. At one point, this kid's walking through a border town, and he walks by a church, and he hears the church music going and everybody singing. So he says, "Oh, I'm going to go in and check it out." And he slid into what every church member calls the backslider row. You know, right at the end of the church, right next to the exit.
Right next to the
and
exit.
He sat there and watched, and he's wearing a backpack, and he says he keeps his skin in there, coyote skin. And as he watches this thing, he suddenly decides, "I want to become a Christian." Wow. And so he went up when they did the, you know, they asked everybody to come up, and he accepted Jesus. Whoa. So he goes back home, and that night his buddies come over and says, "Come on, let's go change. Let's go have some fun." And he says they all started to chant and they all started to sing, and they were going through their system of affecting the shape change. And he says that his buddies changed. He says, you leave the door open so you can run out.
Right.
And he even told me that when that happens, when you change, everything gets blurry. There's a red shift in the color spectrum, and your thinking becomes more animalistic.
I was gonna say animalistic.
Yeah, he says you don't think like a human anymore. And he says that his buddies changed shape and ran out the door. And he says he tried and he couldn't change shape. Then he sits there and he says, I guess that's what it means when you become a Christian, that you can't do those old things anymore.
Right.
So, and I spoke to a guy that had a really, really seriously bad background. And he ended up becoming a Christian. I don't know if he's still alive today, but he was saying that some of the stuff that he did there was no redemption for him at all.
Right. I can probably imagine some of the things that he might have been involved in, but yeah.
It's up to the individuals.
Right. It's almost like you have to, if you aren't a narcissist, right? If you aren't a psychopath, and you do feel some sort of remorse, and you allow forgiveness for yourself, then salvation can be for you, right? But you have to be willing. Yeah, you have to be willing to pretty much give yourself up in many facets, physical, spiritual, and mental.
It's just like an alcoholic. Your family can't put you in a treatment center and expect you to not be an alcoholic when you get out.
Right.
You have to decide.
Yes. Right. Absolutely. I can judge.
Relate.
I mean,
yeah.
I can relate. Yes, I can relate to that, I should say. And what's funny is, and I this is something we're kind of now a little bit over time, and I don't mean to keep you too long.
That's
but
okay.
They call, I'm pretty open about it. Because I think my path was kind of meant for me. It was meant to bring me to this seat right now, talking to you, right? Everything had to have happened the exact way it did for me to get here to talk to you. So I try not to live too much in fear of my past, or like, I'm not beholden to it anymore. For a long time I was, it ruled
you don't let it define you.
Exactly. And so where I was going with this is, I am pretty open about it. But they called, I learned this in the treatment facility, actually. And I haven't had a drink in almost, I'm going on 6 years. And my mom, she was always a really big supporter of mine. Hollywood obviously didn't help. The lifestyle I was living just didn't, I was putting myself in these scenarios. But they call it, and I'd never really thought about it until it was kind of like today when you said the spelling thing. But when you go to a liquor store, there's a reason it's called wine and spirits, right? Because in this liquor bottle is a spirit, and you become a different person. You are essentially possessed when you're drinking. Like my father, when he drank and he took substances, he became a different and a violent person. When I drank, I became a very isolationist. I'd be, and I had swore to myself that I would never become my father. And there I was, exactly like him, trait wise, not, I wasn't violent like him, but I have my own way of being. And there, like I said, there is a reason they call it a spirit. And I think alcohol is one of the most, if not the most dangerous drug on the face of the planet.
Sure, because it's legal.
Yeah. 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 And it's so readily available, right? And it's
Yeah.
so socially acceptable. It's built in to our norms. Like, as a sober person, I'm always conscious of being invited to a wedding with an open bar, right? Like those are things I start thinking about. I'm like, you know, it's the situations that we're put in. And then you're watching the Super Bowl. Half the commercials are for fucking Bud Light, right? Or some
Right.
tequila or liquor. Imagine if on your TV up popped an ad for heroin, right? Some guy fixing up and buy Pfizer heroin. What if that like what are we doing? And I guess that's why I've always kind of related to certain Native people. I do have a couple friends that are Native. To their families are Native, and I always really like. I loved listening to their parents, particularly. I
Hmm.
liked the wisdom, the way that they shaped the world, and this, how they talked about things. It just fascinated me. Um, what is if there's one message that you can tell people through all of the work, all of the stuff that you've done, everything, if there's one message you could give to people, what would it be?
Oh boy, that's a good one. I would tell you that we live in a much stranger world than anybody thinks. And it's there, it's all around us. And we can close our eyes and put the blinders on and go through our lives, or we can accept it. But, we may not believe in them, but they believe in us.
And yep, exactly. So you know, there, of course, I want to have so many. I could talk to you for literally days. Um, I think you're such a unique individual, and the things that you've been through. How do you balance it? How do you balance your cultural heritage and spiritual beliefs and investigative mind, dealing with the unknown?
I don't try to force that on anybody. The whole reason that we got involved in speaking about this stuff is just to let everybody know this is what we've experienced. You may not believe in everything that I believe, but like I said before, you didn't see what I saw, or you didn't
Right,
see what I investigated.
right.
So that being said, there's a lot of stuff out there. We just need to open our eyes to be able to see it.
Right. Absolutely. Where can people I know you said you're right. So it sounds like you're writing a book. I know you had a partner, Stanley, right? Stanley
Yeah.
Milford. Here he is pictured. He wrote The Paranormal Ranger. You're writing a book, uh, Paranormal Ranger, and uh, where else can people find you? And when do you think that book will make its way onto shelves?
I'm about a third through it. I've got 12,000 words written so far.
Woo!
But there's 47 chapters, so it might be a two-parter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just talk about the paranormal, it talks about everything that I did. I mean, I was an EMT going to traffic accidents, um, you know, technical rescue of people that were stuck, on ropes and things, um, just all kinds of stuff. And I don't miss the work. I miss the people that I used to work with.
Right.
And then after that, I actually had a whole different career and got involved in medical manufacturing. And we were making peripheral artery stents and aortic stents. And then I got into maintenance and calibration and metrology and tooling repair. So
Wow.
highly, skilled trade stuff. And
I was going to say,
then
you have such a wide range of skill set.
yeah, and then finally decided, okay, that's enough. I'm going to grab my Social Security and get out of here. So,
I love that. And now writing this book, you also have a podcast that you do. Fantastic, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah, that'll
So
be the Paranormal Rangers. You can find it on YouTube.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But that's your KGRA digital broadcasting.
Right. So it streams on that as well as on podcast platforms for anyone. And
Yeah.
I'll include all the links for that stuff in the description below in the post. So John, I like I said, I could go on for hours and hours and hours.
Well,
Like I said,
we'll have to do a part 2.
yeah, and a part 3 and 4. I want to come out there. Now, do you live on the reservation right now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, you said it was like coming to this is like this is the post credit stinger, if you will, because the formal interview part is over. But what do you have to get permission to come onto the land? Like, what's that like?
No, you don't need to have permission. You don't need a passport, but you are considered a guest. And
Right.
so, once you come out there, we hook up. We'll give you the nickel tour, take you around a little bit. Navajo Nation is 27,000 square miles of land, covering literally 4 states up in
Right.
the Four Corners area. It's about the size of the state of West Virginia.
God
So
damn.
a lot of land to cover. Where we'd only see a little portion of it.
And that's where these pictograph stuff, that's where that is. So, and again, we
Yeah,
didn't even get into that. But
no,
people don't carve things in the way that, and those aren't even those aren't even carvings. Those are something else.
yeah,
So, people don't, I would assume that the native, like the original natives, they wouldn't be doing something like that if they did not want us to know, or the like that's how they wanted to communicate what they were seeing. And again,
right,
just on a brief couple pictures, I mean, you see these beings, and I just grabbed these really quick before we started, but I mean, you can tell that like there's a goat there or a sheep there, right? Or a ram. Like it's very defined, the animal and then the human. And then there's something else there. And again, if you start asking your questions in your head, like they clearly know how to accurately represent something. So why in that same reference would they draw this alien looking being? Right? All
right.
wacky if it didn't actually exist the way that's how they saw it.
That's
So
right.
that's fascinating. How many pictographs have you guys found or know about?
I've personally been to probably 1,000 of them.
And that's all on Navajo Nation land.
Yeah, and many that were off the reservation. I mean, I think they estimated that there are 300,000 known archaeological sites on Navajo Reservation. There may be another 2.5 million that we don't know about.
Oh my God. Wow.
And it's actually illegal to go to an archaeological site on the reservation. There's only 3 people that are allowed. number one, an archaeologist, number two, a medicine man, and number three, a Navajo Ranger.
How fitting. How fitting. You almost, that's really interesting. So there's clearly a reason for that. And a very, that makes a lot of sense. And so there seems to be like a real hierarchy there, to the locations, to the information. Now, one last thing before I let you go, because it just popped into my head. Now, obviously, people die when there's a transfer of information. Is someone picked early on and then, kind of groomed to be able to take over the information payload, and that's the cycle continuing? Or they don't just, it's not like when you become president, right? Like you get it all right there. Couldn't be.
I think what we're talking about here is medicine men. And for medicine men, in the old days, they were kind of like a general practitioner. You were taught everything from a very early age into adulthood.
Okay.
Nowadays, you have a different situation, and you have what I would call an eye, nose, and throat specialist. You have medicine men now that are only practiced in just a few of the things. So it's very different. Yeah. Because they haven't done this their whole lives. They can't learn everything. And then, so it's very different nowadays.
Right.
But it still exists.
Right. But but the sacreds, like the sacred information, the oral history, I mean, that's got to be, someone's got to get that and then hold it. Someone's got to, so is there someone, is that like the chief of the Navajo? Is there a president of the Navajo?
It's handed down to everybody. It's just up to us if we want to listen. And so, but the rule is that we had an oral tradition, which means that everything that is told to you has to be repeated exactly. You cannot change it. Your fish can't get bigger and bigger every story. It has to be told exactly the same way every single time.
So yeah, because that's what a lot of people pull to, is like, okay, maybe these stories of like a game of telephone, they've changed, through various interpretations, and wanting to, the human thing is to want to make a story more interesting. So, putting their own little details in there. So you're saying that there is that rule of like no alterations.
Yeah, for a medicine man doing a single ceremony over 3 nights, called an enemy way ceremony, they would have to sing over 240 songs over 3 nights, and you cannot make a mistake. Otherwise, that whole ceremony is negated. And people are paying big money for these ceremonies. I mean, whole families pitch in. So if you better believe that they're watching, waiting for the medicine man to make a mistake so they can say, I'm not paying you because you messed it up.
You fudged up. Wow. Yeah. So okay. All right. This stuff, I could like question just after question after question after question. But Jon, you are such a really, really interesting guy. And there's so much more that we just didn't even get to touch on, and that's just in 2 hours, right? So definitely have to do a part 2, and I'd really love to talk about coming out there as soon as possible. And I really, really respect what you do, and from the Total Disclosure audience and program, you have an open door here. So with that being said, everyone, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as well as check out the Paranormal Rangers podcast on KGRA Digital and on any podcast platform that you can find. All the links for that will be in the description below. We thank you, and we'll see you on the other.